From Nutrien Ag Solutions, this is Senior Meteorologist Andrew Pritchard with your Ag Forecast for Thursday, July 1st, 2021. Eric Snodgrass is on vacation getting some much-deserved rest, so I'm going to join you here, take you through a look over the next 10 to 15 days, how things are going to be evolving here across North America. We do have some changes to talk about, and then Eric will be back with us here next week. I wanted to start off with a look at this satellite image that Dakota Smith tweeted out. He's great at finding these really cool satellite animations and sharing those. He's a great follow on social media, but we're taking a look at the animation here over British Columbia. We've been talking about this massive ridge that brought record-breaking heat to the Pacific Northwest, portions of Western Canada. That ridge continues to migrate across the Canadian prairie, and we're seeing some very intense wildfires. This is, again, over British Columbia, and I'm going to hit pause on this. I'm going to jump back, and I want to step through time with this one so I can show you before those, what we're seeing here is these are thunderstorms. These are big pyrocumulus clouds, but before those appear, you can see these smoke plumes from these very intense wildfires. So what we're seeing here are thunderstorms that are being initiated by these wildfires. And the way that we do that is take a massive ridge of high pressure and park it over the region here where we've got extreme heat. And so as you go through the profile of the atmosphere, go up thousands of feet above our heads, we have instability there. We have very steep lapse rates, which means that the temperature is cooling very rapidly with height because it's so warm down near the surface. So we get these fires, that only exacerbates things. We've got very steep lapse rates. We initiate these storms, but we're doing so over a very dry air mass. So these storms don't have much rain, but they do have lightning. So they also exacerbate the situation here because now we've got thunderstorms going on. We've got lightning strikes that are occurring over a very dry air mass, very dry terrain, and that initiates new fires. So we can confirm that here, taking a look at the satellite picture, visible on the left again. And then on the right, we're using a product here that helps us see the temperature of the ground. So you're seeing these hot spots, the little black spots there. Those are the wildfires being detected by the GOES 16 satellite. And then again, on the left side, we've got the satellite imagery showing these very intense thunderstorms ongoing above those fires. Now, if we look at the U.S., the fire weather risk here over the next 24 hours, we've got the risk for some isolated dry storms, which is, again, these thunderstorms initiating here, very little rainfall, but we do have the lightning. It can add new fires to the region. We have a risk of that across eastern Oregon, southern portions of Idaho, really the southern two-thirds there, including the Snake River Valley, southwestern Montana, and then western portions of Wyoming. We've also got an elevated risk for wildfires across kind of east central Montana, where we've got very hot, dry, and breezy conditions in place. Now I want to talk about the precipitation here over the month of June as we round out June, head into July now. What we're looking at here is the first half of June. We're looking at climate division here, precipitation ranks, and where you see the numbers here in the 120 to 129 range here, this is what we're talking about, a top 5 driest start to the month of June. Of course, we see very dry conditions across the western United States as well, but what I want to draw your attention to is this corridor here where portions of Missouri getting into Illinois and then extending into Indiana and Michigan. Some locations on pace for maybe a top 15 driest June on record, now finishing with a top 10 or top 15 wettest June on record as we park that stationary boundary, again, from the Great Lakes down into the Panhandle regions here, the Texas Panhandle, continue to draw Gulf of Mexico moisture northward there. Several days of repeated rounds of very heavy thunderstorms, 5 to 7 days of active weather across that region made a huge difference. And that's really illustrated well when we look at the last 14 days departure from normal precipitation here. You see the big blue corridor where we're talking about, inches above normal, in some cases 4 to 5 inches above normal here along that corridor where we have this stalled stationary boundary that simply did not move much over the last 5 days or so. Last 48 hours of precipitation, it's been heaviest along that same corridor, portions of eastern New Mexico through the Central Plains into the eastern Corn Belt here. A little bit less on the heavy side, except where you have some of those corridors of heavier thunderstorms. Some areas here picking up over an inch of rainfall. As we look at the soil moisture, you can really draw the cutoff line here well. This is something that Eric was talking about in the forecast guidance, and then kind of did a checkup on here with our Monday video. But along in southeast of that line, very heavy rainfall over the last 10 to 14 days. North of that line, very little rainfall over the last 10 to 14 days and increasingly hot conditions across that area, so evaporation rates are quite high as well. So any moisture that has been deposited there over the last 10 to 14 days quickly leaving the soil there. Now, what we've got going on Thursday morning here, I want to take a look at the satellite picture across North America. We can really pick out the pattern. Here's our stalled boundary, still again from the Central Plains into portions of the Eastern Corn Belt, and then swinging up into New England here. We've got a risk of some strong storms across portions of the Mid-Atlantic. Behind that, you see the big ridge, cloud-free sky across the Canadian prairie. Almost the entire prairie provinces there, Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba, entirely cloud-free. Same story as you make your way down through the Dakotas into Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Iowa. Beautiful sunny skies. Hot and dry, though, is going to be the theme here as we head through the next several days. You look south of that boundary, plenty of Gulf of Mexico moisture here, where it is just soggy. We've got dew points in the mid-70s from the Ohio River Valley into the Central Plains and then on south across the Gulf of Mexico. In fact, I have a dew point map coming up here in a moment. But again, from satellite to radar now, ongoing clusters of showers and storms here from New England all the way back along the Ohio River Valley and then into portions of the Central Plains. Here it is, dew points, 70s from portions of Kansas, Missouri, Illinois, into Indiana, on south from there down to the Gulf of Mexico. As you make your way back to the north and to the west, precipitation free, unfortunately, but a little more comfortable as we talk about dew points in the 50s and 60s. That's going to help us warm up quickly, though, so it's going to be a dry heat across portions of the Dakotas, where it is a kind of muggy warm across portions of the central United States. We'll take a look at the advisories here across the U.S. and Canada, because across the Pacific Northwest, excessive heat warnings, fire weather warnings, those continue. And then as you extend off to the north into the Canadian prairie, we've got heat warnings in effect now overspreading the entirety of Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba. It's been a slow west to east shift in the heat here, or a slow migration from west to east across the Canadian prairie. But for the next 48 hours, much of that region continues to bake as the ridge continues to move off to the south and to the east, and eventually begin to flatten out here as we get into the weekend, and that's going to mean a little bit of a pattern change in that area as well. Off to the south, where our frontal boundary continues to slowly sink off to the south, we've got flood watches in effect, flash flood watches here from the Texas Panhandle across portions of Oklahoma, southeast Kansas, southern Missouri, and then on into the Ohio River Valley. Turning our attention to the tropics, we've got Elsa here, located about 600 miles off to the east of the Windward Islands here. We can take an updated look at the satellite picture here. Still rather disorganized, but pulsing areas of thunderstorms there where you see the red, the black, and the white cloud tops here. That's where we've got very intense thunderstorm activity. What you don't see here is that real tight cyclonic swirl. So again, we're looking at thunderstorms continuing to bubble in that area, and we'll continue to watch for intensification with this, of course, over the next 24 to 48 hours. The National Hurricane Center continues to monitor this. They've got it maintaining tropical storm strength. We'll look at some of the ensembles here. There is a low-end potential here that we could talk about, maybe getting toward Category 1, low-end hurricane strength. It's really going to come down to how we interact with some of the terrain here as we get into portions of Jamaica, the Dominican Republic, and Cuba, whether or not we get too much interference there, leading to a weakening trend, or if we maybe steer clear of the land there, that offers up more of an opportunity for some intensification. Now, some disagreement here in the track of Elsa. We've got the GFS wanting to take this more into the Gulf of Mexico over toward the Florida Panhandle, a bit more of a westerly track, whereas the European ensemble, more of a cluster, taking that eastern turn a little bit earlier, a little bit stronger with the trough here across the southeast U.S., helping to kind of nudge that off to the east, nudge Elsa off to the east a little bit earlier. Now, the National Hurricane Center and some of our other global models here, a bit more of a consensus with that westerly track for now, whereas again, the European taking the easterly turn here before we get to Florida, but this is something we're really going to have to monitor as we head through the weekend and into the early part of next week, as Elsa continues to quickly move off to the north and to the west. Now, Tropical Storm Elsa's model intensity guidance here. Again, much of the guidance keeping things here in the tropical storm realm here, with a couple ensemble members here maybe flirting with getting into Category 1. Again, weak hurricane strength here, depending on how we interact with the terrain features here over the next 48 to 72 hours. So you look at the most likely arrival time of tropical storm force winds. We're talking about getting into Friday night into Saturday across the Dominican Republic, Haiti, Jamaica, maybe Sunday morning, and then Cuba as we get into Sunday night and Monday morning. And then as we get into the Florida Panhandle, possibly talking about, the peninsula of Florida here, and then up toward the Panhandle a little bit later. But this would be talking about a Monday into Tuesday arrival across the southeastern United States. Now let's take a look at where we're going over the next 10 to 15 days. And I want to do that looking at the European model 500 millibar height anomalies here over the next 10 days or so, starting with where we are now. And again, you see the big ridge of high pressure now parked over the Canadian prairie. That is why, again, heat warnings in effect for the entirety of Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba as we go through the next 24 to 48 hours, heat peaking across that region. Now we'll step through time slowly over the next couple of days. You watch the ridge slowly moving off to the east. That's going to allow heat to break from west to east across the prairie slowly over the weekend into early next week. Alberta, you'll start to feel some relief from the excessive heat as we get into the next 24 to 48 hours, and that'll make its way into Manitoba as we get into Monday and Tuesday of the coming week as well. Now, as the jet stream flattens out, we're first going to see the opportunity for at least isolated to scattered shower and thunderstorm activity to return to the Canadian prairie. Now, not a drought-busting rain here, but bringing the heat back a little bit and reintroducing the chance for at least isolated to scattered precipitation. That sounds like a nice first step towards kind of mitigating some of the recent stress that we're seeing here popping up from the extremely hot and dry conditions across the region. As we take this a little bit further into mid and late week, it's possible we'll end up with some northwest flow, not only northwest flow, but northwest flow that includes some minor disturbances here that could kick off some thunderstorm activity from the prairie across portions of the Dakotas into the upper Midwest and the eastern Corn Belt. Now, big questions as far as how this is going to, affect the precipitation distribution across the Dakotas and the upper Midwest, where we've been exceptionally dry going back to, the early part of the climatological summer, going back to June 1st into the end of May. Kind of a long-term drought beginning to stack up across this region. And we were missed by the precipitation in the last half of June. We were hit by that across this corridor, missed as you make your way back toward the north and to the west. So questions as far as how much precipitation we're going to see there, and those questions popping up because of some recent changes in some of the guidance. But we'll get to that in a moment. I want to take this just a little bit further out here into the day 7 to 10 time frame and show you that we're starting to see some suggestion that we'll see another trough swinging in here through the Great Lakes, again reintroducing fairly high confidence and some shower and storm activity late next week, returning to the Midwest, portions of the Ohio River Valley and the eastern Corn Belt, and then also growing confidence that we're going to kind of reestablish this ridge across the western United States, which would lead to, again, heat returning to the west and dry conditions being maintained across that region. So a key element of this entire evolution over the next 10 to 15 days, we're looking at precipitable water. So really, how much moisture do we have in the atmosphere? And we've had a lot of it here across this corridor. You're seeing precipitable water values in some cases above 2 inches. And that's saying that if we took all the moisture from our heads all the way up through the column of the atmosphere and wrung it out, how much would we have? When we start talking about 1.5 inches, 2 inches, that is extremely muggy air, and that's why we've had the pattern that we have over the last 7 to 10 days, which is it's very easy to kick off these clusters of heavy rain producing thunderstorms. And so again, a big element of that, the very, very moist air that we've had, thanks in part to the wide open Gulf of Mexico. We've had an area of high pressure, and we have maintained steady flow northward moisture transport from the Gulf of Mexico, keeping the ingredient there, for repeated rounds of showers and storms. So let's take this a little bit further here and watch what happens. We get into the weekend. We're going to start to see this front swing through. We'll scour the moisture here as we head into the weekend. That's going to lead us into a very comfortable holiday weekend across the Midwest, where dew points will be quite lower, not quite so muggy across that region. But watch what happens here as that front doesn't clear the Gulf, but instead kind of just washes out and then honestly kind of lifts back toward the north here as we get into Monday and Tuesday and Wednesday of next week. And now we're into, July 8th, 9th, and 10th, and we're talking about precipitable water values climbing right back to where they were in that 1.5 to 2 inch threshold. And again, with northwest flow, like we talked about, looking at the 500 millibar height pattern, the possibility or the likelihood that we'll have minor disturbances within that, and the environment being ready to pop, ready to rain. That is why I've got higher confidence in the return of shower and storm activity across the same regions here, the mid-Mississippi Valley into the Ohio River Valley, as we get into the end of next week and next weekend. So let's look at the precipitation forecast that follows all of this. We'll bring it back to Thursday. Again, highest coverage of thunderstorm activity along that boundary from the Central Plains into the Mid-Atlantic. Again, that risk for some strong storms across the Mid-Atlantic as we get into the afternoon and the evening. This is Thursday night now, getting into Friday. Let's take it into Saturday. The ridge continues to shift off to the south and to the east. We are less humid and we are drier now across the Midwest, across the Corn Belt as we head into the holiday weekend. We'll take it into Saturday and Sunday. This is where we're starting to see at least isolated thunderstorm activity returning to the prairie. Remember, not a drought-busting rain, but we're starting to bring in the chance for at least some of this scattered rain across the area. And this lingers through the weekend into the early part of next week. Now we're getting into Monday now. We're seeing a little system maybe bringing some isolated showers and storms into portions of the upper Midwest, but the big change really holds off until we get into midweek. This is Tuesday. Now Wednesday, we're starting to build another boundary right across this region. We're going to see another trough that swings in as we get into the weekend. This is Thursday now, getting into Friday, and getting back into Saturday. Now, we're not going to take this verbatim. We're out into day 9, day 10. We know that there's going to be uncertainty here, but we're seeing growing confidence in this kind of mid to late week progression of reintroducing, the potential for daily chances for thunderstorms across the mid-Mississippi Valley into the eastern Corn Belt. Of course, question marks as you make your way further off to the north and to the west. You could draw that same line that Eric was drawing last week, kind of through Minnesota into portions of Iowa and Nebraska here, and put a big question mark there. And part of that is because I'm going to show you the last 4 model runs from the European model, looking at days 5 to 10, I'm showing you the 10-day precipitation anomaly. And so as we look at the forecast that came out yesterday morning, the morning of the 29th, going back 2 days, you see this corridor of precipitation across the Dakotas into Minnesota and Wisconsin. The model that came out after that, and then I want to show you yesterday morning's model run, still have the precipitation, and then here's what happened last night. We take a big bite out of that. We've still got isolated to scattered storms across the Canadian prairie into the upper Midwest and northern Wisconsin, way in the Northwoods here as we get into really the weekend into early next week. Where we see the big difference, though, is now we're missing that heavy corridor of precipitation across the Dakotas, further south into Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Iowa that had been being kind of advertised the middle of next week. We still see the precipitation returning to the mid-Mississippi Valley, the Ohio River Valley, as we get into the end of next week. Of course, we have higher confidence in that occurring, though, with the wide open Gulf and the potential for northwest flow. So what I want to do then is look at the next 15 days quickly in kind of 5-day chunks. So we're looking at days 0 through 5, your 500 millibar height anomalies, top left, the temperature anomaly, bottom left, and then we've got the precipitation anomaly forecast over the next 5 days on the right. So really the pattern over the next 5 days, we're going to be warmer and drier across the Canadian prairie into the northern plains, drier as we make your way into the central and eastern Corn Belt where it's been very wet over the last 7 to 14 days. Now, as we talk about getting into days 5 to 10, we slowly reintroduce the precipitation chances to the Canadian prairie and potentially portions of the northern plains into the upper Midwest with northwest flow across the region. Of course, big question marks and concerns with the reliability of the moisture signal across the Dakotas, portions of Minnesota, getting into Nebraska, and really how substantial those precipitation chances are going to be across the Canadian prairie. As well, higher confidence in that precipitation returning to the Midwest, the eastern Corn Belt, the Ohio River Valley. And then again, along the Gulf Coast, where we keep the Gulf of Mexico wide open, keeping that transport of moisture going, we're going to keep heavy rain and thunderstorms in the forecast there. So temperature is going to be a bit on the cooler side, and that really is just driven by extensive cloud cover and precipitation across the region. So it's not as if this is a pattern that's really, sending cold air out of the north down into the southern U.S. This is it's a very gloomy and very wet pattern across that region. Heat begins to build, keeping things dry as you make your way up through the Four Corners, then into the Pacific Northwest and Western Canada. So we talk about days 5 to 10, and then over the next 10 days, the probability of picking up an inch or more of rainfall. So you look at the Ohio River Valley and then back into kind of the Ozarks. A lot of that's over the next 2 to 3 days. We are going to dry out as we head through the holiday weekend. And check out the Gulf Coast. Of course, we keep the Gulf of Mexico open. Going to be looking at daily chances for thunderstorms across that region really over the next 5 to 10 days, almost uninterrupted. You look at portions of Alberta there, we're going to see the chance for some showers and storms again as early as late tomorrow heading through the weekend, so portions of central Alberta, and then you make your way down the Highway 16 corridor. There will be hit or miss showers and storms over the next 5 to 10 days, especially as we get a little bit, on the other side of this weekend. But then days 10 to 15, we keep the wet signal here in the Midwest, in the Ohio River Valley, keeping the dry bias, though, across the Canadian Prairie into the Dakotas and the upper Midwest. We'll look at your holiday weekend real quick, and then we'll end this video. We're looking at current conditions, the midday weather for Thursday, that'd be today, and then your high temperatures for Thursday as well. So heat building across the northern plains, across the Northwest, the Pacific Northwest, starting to see the extreme heat begin to fade. And then you see the frontal boundary from the Central Plains, Kansas and Oklahoma. You'll see scattered storms popping up this afternoon. Same thing as you make your way into southern Missouri, southern Illinois, along the Ohio River Valley. And then that chance for some strong storms in the mid-Atlantic this afternoon and this evening. Midday weather on Friday. The front continues to sink off to the south. Showers and storms most numerous across the Gulf Coast states, back into the Red River Valley of the south. Seeing that heat continue to spread across the Dakotas. Cooler as you look at things across the Midwest. Look at the Eastern Corn Belt, mid to upper 70s for the highs tomorrow. Going to be seeing sunny skies, fair weather. It's going to feel a lot like April out there in portions of the Eastern Corn Belt on Friday. But we do start to warm up as we head into the weekend, keeping things dry. Your Saturday here, if you have outdoor holiday plans, high pressure, keeping things dry from everywhere except the Gulf Coast up into portions of the Northeast, where we could see some isolated shower activity. And then your 4th of July holiday, looking hot across the Northwest into the northern plains. Temperatures in the 90s and the hundreds here as you go from portions of California up through the Pacific Northwest into the northern plains. And then rainfall chances. Where's the chance that your 4th of July gets rained on or stormed on? That's going to be really highest across central and eastern Texas into southern Louisiana, and then back up into portions of the Northeast, Vermont, New Hampshire, Maine, portions of eastern New York, maybe a stray shower or storm as well. I hope you have a wonderful, safe holiday weekend. Again, Eric Snodgrass will be back with us on Monday morning. Be sure to like and subscribe if you haven't already. We'll be back to talk to you on Monday.